Justice had nothing to do with it. This was purely about the money. 4,000 years back, way before banks existed, before anyone traded stocks, before economy was even a word people understood, there was this one leader who figured out something that most folks today still haven't grasped. Societies don't fall apart because their people lack morals. They crumble when the financial system breaks down, and once that system fails, violence is right around the corner. This is where wealth, authority, and the past all come crashing together, and trust me, nothing here is straightforward. When you hear Hammurabi, what comes to mind? Probably revenge, right? Eye for an eye stuff. You repicturing this harsh ancient civilization where punishment was literally chiseled into rock and compassion was nowhere to be found. It's an easy story to believe, clean and simple. And it's basically completely false. Here's the thing, if you actually look past all the legends and read what's actually written on that stone tablet from around 1754 BCE, something surprising hits you. Hammurabi's Code? It's not really about morals at all, it's about finance. Take a close look at those nearly 300 laws. The vast majority aren't dealing with killing, violence, or payback. Instead, they're tackling loans, pay rates, business agreements, interest charges, collateral, payment failures, who's liable for what, and debt. Basically, all the stuff that silently determines who makes it and who does, and once your society grows beyond just a small village. Babylon wasn't some grand philosophical test run. It was a business powerhouse. Located right between major trading paths, it handled the movement of grain, silver, animals, property, workers, and credit for a massive population. Farmers took out loans betting on their next harvest. Traders financed journeys across long distances. Construction workers got paid to build homes and public works. The whole thing ran on trust. But trust without enforcement? That doesn't work at scale. Without common rules, one bad crop season turns into personal catastrophe. One unpaid debt becomes a violent family conflict. One building that falls down becomes justification for brutality. Hammurabi didn't walk into a peaceful world and decide to preach morality. He walked into an unstable economic powder keg and chose to steady it. Here's what people constantly overlook. The code wasn't designed to turn people into saints. It was designed to make results foreseeable. Because when outcomes are unpredictable, economies die. When nobody knows who's on the hook for a loss, trade grinds to a halt, credit vanishes. People turn to force instead. Hammurabi grasped something crucial: stopping chaos didn't require ethical speeches. It required clearly defining who pays when things fall apart. The second you establish who's liable, behavior shifts, incentives get created. A system emerges. Debt was the first crisis he tackled. Back in ancient Mesopotamia, debt wasn't some abstract concept. It was brutally real and immediate. When a farmer borrowed grain and his crops failed, he wasn't just defaulting on paper. His actual life fell apart. Authorities could grab his land. They could take his kids as servants to work off the debt. His entire family could end up in bondage because of one terrible growing season. If you let this kind of debt trap continue, it doesn't just destroy individual families. It wipes out your tax revenue, destabilizes food production, and fuels rebellion. A civilization that drowns its own food producers in endless debt won't survive long. That's why the code set boundaries, not because of kindness, but survival. Interest rates got capped. Debt servitude had time limits instead of lasting forever. After natural disasters, debts could sometimes be paused. These weren't mercy gestures, they were damage control. Farmers who are dead or enslaved can't produce grain. And a king without grain? He won't stay king very long. Hammurabi wasn't rescuing the poor out of compassion. He was protecting the system that kept his empire fed. Next up, contracts. Hammurabi's laws ignored what people intended to do. They focused entirely on what actually happened. A builder puts up a house and it falls down, killing the homeowner. That builder faces consequences. A merchant loses goods someone trusted him with. He's liable. An agent doesn't deliver. Responsibility doesn't evaporate into excuses. This wasn't savage punishment, it was absolute clarity. When everyone knows exactly who's responsible, people start calculating risk properly. Builders construct more carefully. Merchants get insurance. Trade becomes safer not because humans suddenly became nicer, but because everyone knows the consequences up front. This is the brilliant part people miss. The code didn't try to prevent all failures, it just assigned them. Somebody always had to pay. And once people knew exactly who that somebody would be, their behavior changed automatically. The concept that risk has to land somewhere, that losses do and just disappear, because circumstances were unfortunate, that's one of humanity's oldest financial principles. Way before insurance companies existed, before corporations with limited liability, before modern contract law, Hammurabi understood moral hazard without having a name for it. When people face no consequences for outcomes, they gamble recklessly. And when reckless gambling spreads across an entire society, you get collapse. Wages and prices got the same treatment. The code specified exact payments for particular types of work. Ox drivers got this amount. Surgeons received that amount. Builders, shepherds, craftspeople, everyone's pay was standardized. Not because that was fair, but because it prevented arguments. Every negotiation creates friction. Every disagreement threatens breakdown. Hammurabi's approach eliminated guesswork. You walked in knowing your labor's value beforehand. You knew your payment if things went right, and what happened if they didn't. Markets don't require niceness. They require predictability. Hammurabi wasn't trying to maximize everyone's happiness. He was keeping business flowing and predictability. That's what greases the wheels of commerce. It cuts transaction costs. It stops endless negotiations. It prevents disagreements from turning bloody. In a world without courtrooms, appeals processes, or regulatory agencies, these rules became the foundation of trust. But there's one more element baked into the code, and this is where that romantic vision of ancient justice really shatters. The rules weren't equal. Punishment for identical offenses changed based on social class. Injuring a nobleman carried different penalties than injuring a regular person. Financial liability flowed differently depending on your status. Power was literally written into the legal code. This wasn't inconsistency, it was intentional design. Elites received protection because they controlled land, capital, and political stability. Lower classes carried more risk because the system needed them to. This wasn't about creating fairness. It was about preserving a hierarchy. And that, too, represents a financial principle as ancient as civilization itself. Systems don't just handle money. They determine who absorbs the losses when reality goes sideways. Hammurabi made that choice transparent. By the time that code got carved and displayed publicly, Babylon had already absorbed a truth that modern societies still struggle with. You don't manage debt through virtue. You don't stabilize commerce through good intentions. And you don't stop collapse by hoping humans will act better. You accomplish it by creating rules that make outcomes predictable, losses assignable, and power transparent. Hammurabi understood this completely. Not because it was compassionate. It succeeded because it accepted something most societies refuse to admit, that every economic system ultimately decides who absorbs risk when reality breaks your plans. Hammurabi's code didn't pretend losses could vanish. It didn't guarantee prosperity for everyone. It accomplished something far more radical and far more powerful. It made loss predictable. Different social classes faced different consequences for identical actions because equality wasn't the goal. Compensation goes to the slave's owner because the law viewed that loss not as human pain but as damaged property. This logic ran through everything. A surgeon who killed a nobleman lost both hands. Same patient but a slave? Just replace the asset. A builder got executed if his collapsing house killed the owner, but merely paid compensation if it killed a slave. Elites possessed land, capital, and political influence. Shielding them wasn't favoritism, it was containing risk. When a wealthy landowner collapsed, the shockwave spread through tenants, workers, taxes, and food supplies. When a laborer collapsed, the system barely registered it. That wasn't moral philosophy. That was brutal mathematics. And it's the exact same mathematics governing today's financial systems, regardless of how politely we dress it up. This is where ancient history starts feeling eerily current. Because what Hammurabi carved into stone, we now encode into legislation. Bankruptcy laws don't exist to reward people who failed. They ensure collapse doesn't trigger uncontrollable cascades. It's preventing mass defaults from ripping apart the very system that created the debt originally. They intervene because unmanaged collapse is catastrophic. When instability stays trapped at the bottom, it's frequently ignored. That's not political ideology. Consider inflation for a second. It destroys savings. It reduces the real weight of debt. It transfers pain from borrowers onto currency holders. It's identical logic to what Hammurabi applied capping interest and suspending debts following disasters. You reshape the rules so damage spreads rather than concentrates. Modern societies endlessly discuss free markets, fairness, and equal opportunity. Ancient Babylon was brutally honest. The code didn't pretend everyone played by identical rules. It explicitly told you your position. It told you exactly who paid when things went wrong. It didn't sell fantasies about morality governing money. It admitted that money governed morality. Predictability drives participation. Participation drives growth. Growth drives power. Hammurabi grasped that if people believed the rules were stable, even harsh ones, they'd continue producing, trading and lending. Chaos doesn't spring from inequality alone. It springs from uncertainty, from not knowing whether tomorrow's loss will completely destroy you or get absorbed by the system. Modern finance still operates on this exact principle. The difference? Today's rules are buried in legal jargon, regulatory frameworks, and balance sheets most people never examine. In Babylon, the rules were carved in stone and displayed publicly. No illusions existed. No myth of fairness, just structure. They sense something isn't moral, but they're examining the wrong place. The system was never built to be moral. And survival demands sacrifice. Someone always pays. The only real question is who and whether the rules make that answer visible or bury it under complexity. Hammurabi didn't promise freedom, he promised order. And by doing that, he exposed something most people still refuse to grasp. Financial freedom does come from believing the system is just, from recognizing which rules flex under pressure and which ones don't. This is Hammurabi's code's true legacy, not revenge, not brutality. But this realization, once money enters any society, power must choose between chaos and control. The first civilization learned this the painful way. The tools evolve, the language changes, but the underlying structure stays constant. Debt still enslaves, rules still determine outcomes. Power still manages collapse before managing justice. People who understand this aren't surprised when systems bend to save themselves. It was about survival. And 4,000 years later, we're still following it. If this shifted how you see things, hit that subscribe button.